Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Weyandt, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Great Tech Group. This episode was recorded live from Autodesk University in Nashville, Tennessee, where the brightest minds in construction, design, and technology came together to shape the future. Over the course of AU, we talked with industry leaders, innovators, and the change makers about the trends, tools, and ideas driving digital transformation in our great industry. So settle in as we explore how to model the future of construction innovation. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Great Tech Group. We are recording live from Autodesk University here in Nashville, Tennessee, and I am excited to be joined once again, a repeat guest here with Simon Whelan from FenestraPro. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Todd. I don't remember what we talked about the last time, so there's probably going to be some repetition.
It's probably okay. In 6 years,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, great to be back. Thanks for having me. It's always brilliant to chat. So,
forward to it. So, for those who might not know, give a little bit about your history, FenestraPro, what brought you.
Yeah, I'm an architect originally, right? I'm an architectural technologist, and an architect leaned into this, sustainability and environmental design of buildings a number of years ago. Myself and my colleague Dave, who you know as well, we were working in a practice together. I was, as I said, trading maybe on that environmental design side. Dave was heavily involved in facade design, and I suppose it was where those two things overlapped, which led to what we're doing now, which is FenestraPro, right? Yeah. So we always felt that there was a gap or an uncertainty maybe for designers around facade design and the envelope of a building, and how how the facade design impacted the energy performance of a building, particularly understanding these things at an early stage of the design process. So we founded FenestraPro quite a few years ago, and you guys have been really, great supporters ever since, and we develop software solutions to allow architects to understand their facade and the impacts on the energy performance of the building based on their design decisions. So we are Autodesk partners. We develop tools for Revit. We've developed for quite a long time, and more recently Forma. So our FenestraPro for Revit add-in has been quite successful over the years, but like in the last 2 years since Forma came on stream with Autodesk, it's a perfect place for us to live, right? So our envelope analysis extension in Forma, is really useful for those really early stages in a project, understanding the conceptual design and maybe some of your envelope design decisions. So, and as we developed that, we integrated it back into our FenestraPro for Revit product. So now we have this kind of early to later stage design solution, I guess, across our products. So that's what has brought me here to AU. We've been to quite a few of them at this stage, and I suppose proud Autodesk partners.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you've had a busy AU so far. You had the class yesterday. Tell a little bit about the class and what you were presenting on.
Is it now today? It's Wednesday, right? It feels like I've been here for a week and a half at this stage. Yeah, I did my class yesterday with the great Tesla Collier from HNTB, and we got into it a little bit more about Forma and its extension ecosystem, let's just say. Gensler is with HNTB. They do a lot of infrastructure. They do a lot of sports stadiums, first of all, but they do a lot of airports and train stations, etc. So we really concentrate on airports and the early stage of airport terminal building designs, and how you can leverage Forma for that, and some of its extensions around wind and solar radiation and shading, and then including envelope analysis, our tool, and how that allows you to understand maybe some of the key things around terminal design, because you go to an airport, a lot of glass, a lot of shading, a lot of orientation is difficult because of roadways and the master planning of airports and stuff. It was a really great class. We were really happy with it. It went well, and good feedback, good questions, good conversation from the audience. It was great.
Nice. So let's dig into some of the facade and sustainability trends. To kind of set the stage though, what fascinates you most about the kind of overall performance of facades when it comes to the performance of sustainability?
Yeah. What fascinates me most, I think we've always been big proponents of and believers in this idea of early design decisions, right? And this is nothing new, I suppose. This is like everybody always understood this. The earlier you can make decisions, the more impactful they can be. You're seeing this across the board now. I mean, like, I'm sure we'll come back to sustainability more generally in a minute, but like, whether it's Greytech, and you guys talk a lot about shift left, right? Autodesk in their AEC keynote this morning, they talked about high impact planning. I think that was their term. Like, it's all of this kind of understanding that we need to make decisions early in the design process. And that's what we've always been about in FenestraPro. As you're designing a building, and from an early point in the process, if you can understand the implications maybe of your design decision. If I have in an airport 80% glass, what does that mean in terms of it's going to be hot, right? Yeah. Or it's going to be bright, or it's going to be whatever. If I can understand that early, it's going to make it easier for me to keep iterating and tune into the proper solution. That really interests me and excites me, I suppose, is just making those decisions early where they're not a big deal.
I thought about you yesterday during Andrew's keynote. I don't know if you were in there watching, but when they were doing the live demos and they were moving through AI and moving the windows and trying to get a better facade and see the light quality in there. What's the impact of AI coming into facade design?
I think, I've always had an interest. I've always had a funny kind of relationship with AI. I think for years it's been a little bit of a catch-all term that people just like, oh, we'll use AI to figure that one out, and I've always been a little bit skeptical about like the way people use it or talk about it. But I think now it's really starting to hit a phase where people are understanding what we can use AI for. And like my understanding, and I'm no major expert in AI, but my understanding is like this ability to automate just like laborious tasks, like we've always had in FenestraPro, and I wouldn't even call it AI, but like this kind of parametric design almost, where you can put in a value that you're trying to achieve and it will tell you the amount of glazing to use, or the depth of shading to use, or the type of glass to use, so we had that intelligence in FenestraPro for years and years. That's only going to get better and faster, and the performance will be better. But I think AI is not going to replace design being a problem, solving a problem, right, in its simplest form. I think we'll always need architects, and we'll always need engineers, and we'll always need designers. I think AI can just smooth the process and take away some of the rubbish that we have to deal with, the point of view of sustainability. Like, if you are developing or designing a LEED building, the documentation that goes into it is just phenomenal, and it sort of almost takes the good out of it, I think that will help. All of those sort of task-based things, I think, will be really streamlined.
I mean, I think the promise and potential of AI is that it allows the designer to be more creative and really unleash why they went into design into the first place.
For sure.
More creative. Those documentation.
Absolutely. More creative, but also using their knowledge and their expertise on the analysis side of it. Understanding the outcomes, or understanding the feedback, or the data that's coming out. That somebody that will be able to read, okay, if I do this and then if there's a high value, but I change it, there's a lower value, understanding that and implement it into their creative side, as it were, and that's the role of an architect or an engineer, is to have that creativity and that, problem-solving ability, but being able to be quite specialized in understanding what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what are some misconceptions that you think people have around facade design, or more broadly in the sustainability?
Good question. I think misconceptions might be, in the past, maybe this is changing, but in the past it's like, let's just design something that we think will work and we'll figure it out later. Going back to my point about early stage and, shift left, or whatever you want to call it. In the past there's been a lot of, not just for facades, but for building design or anything in our industry, that we'll design now, analyze later. And that can lead to problems, and it's a lot harder to make changes when it's later. So I think that's changed a huge amount. in no small part to tools like what Autodesk have developed with Forma or Revit or any of their other product suite. You guys have really good productivity tools. FenestraPro, we've had tools for those understanding those things at an early stage. So yeah, it had a really good, this is in my head actually, because I had a really good sort of, let's call it almost like philosophical conversation earlier with someone around the role of an architect. That thing that we just talked about is, are they a creator or are they an analyst? And and the reality is they're both, right? They have to be both. Some are more one side, some are more the other, but I think being able to understand these things early, that's the key.
Yeah, so on that kind of continuum, where do you find the balance of the creative versus analysis?
I think that's down to the designer. You know what I mean? I think like every designer is different, every firm is different, every project is different.
So you need to adapt in real time.
I think so. Like, we're still people at the end of the day, and like this is kind of goes back to the AI thing. I don't think you can replace that sort of personable approach that some people are going to be more design, pure creative design led, and some people are going to be more designing by analysis, and it's just getting the balance, as you said, and that's a tricky one to answer. That's a tricky one to pin down.
For sure. So on another kind of continuum side of things, how do you balance the aesthetic performance with having something visually exciting to look at as well, and keep costs under control?
Yeah, again, every project's different, but like that in a nutshell is the role of the designer, right? Like, design is problem solving, and those problems might be a site constraint, or what the building is used for is it can be a problem to be unraveled. Cost, energy performance, carbon, these are all constraints or parameters that we need to work within to design something. And that's the job, isn't it? Solving those problems. Again, just the earlier we can understand what we're designing and how they will impact energy or shading or cost or whatever, that'll only help the process.
Yeah. What role does technology play in that process?
Quick feedback, yeah. Just being able to understand those design decisions. So in our case, in FenestraPro, being able to say, what's the best type of shading? Or, if I reduce my glazing or whatever. In the past, if we go back 10 years, 15 years, whatever, even less in some cases, a designer may have gone, well, I know we need shading, and let's just kind of wing it, and we'll stick something there for the moment. And when we do more complex energy analysis late on, we'll see if it works or not, and that approach doesn't fly anymore, so right. The technology, I suppose, being able to have usable well performing software tools, and AI, let's be honest, I think that only helps.
Yeah. So let's take up to the 30,000 foot level as you're looking at over the industry. What challenges or headwinds do you think the industry's facing with this?
I can't speak for the whole industry. Are you talking about in terms of buildings generally, sustainability, environmental stuff?
On the sustainability side.
Yeah. I think the world, as we know, is like every time you look at the papers or the news, like things like, oh my God, the world's getting worse, right? Yeah. It's like, I think big challenges for climate politics, let's just say, globally, right? It's not as hot a thing that it used to be, and a lot of pushback, as we all know. I think on a positive note, though, I think like our industry, right? Like, I'm looking around here, I can see sustainability over there and whatever, I think architecture, engineering, like, the AC generally has adopted sustainability, not as a new thing, a hypey thing. It's just, it is now. It's something that exists and is, we do have to do it. It's past the hype stage. It's part of our role now. So whatever goes on with the Paris Agreement, or what I mean, whether renewable energy 2030 challenge or whatever, whatever's going on, I think like designers have adopted it as part of their workflows, right? And it's just it's in there, and that is a really good, positive, encouraging sign, I think. Even going back to when maybe we first had a chat 5 or 6 years ago, sustainability was still like, oh, this is this thing that we're trying to all grapple with and we're trying to figure it out. I think we've got past that now, and I think it's really embedded in projects, So notwithstanding still challenges that, maybe it might not be as promoted or legislated for, and that's a worry, or that is definitely a challenge. But it's encouraging to see how embedded it is just in this world, I guess.
Yeah. One of the things that came up in a conversation yesterday was sustainability can sometimes feel kind of heady and intellectual, and so how do you bring that down to the ground level and make it more a practical advice?
Cost. It's cost. Like it used to be. It used to be maybe more expensive to implement maybe some sustainability features or environmental performance in a building. Now it's probably cheaper to do those things, or maybe there's an understanding of how to use those things to make it cheaper. And again, not to keep harping on, but bringing it back to the early stage design, we can make massive impacts on the cost of operating a building at a really early stage by looking at orientation or glazing design or shading or some of these passive features, and I think when people understand how it will hit their pockets, that's a pretty strong message. In terms of talking about it, again, in this industry, I would go back to it a few years ago. It was, I think you're right, it was heady. I don't know if it really is so much anymore. I think people are pretty
coming back down.
People understand it, have adopted it. Maybe AI is where sustainability was a few years ago. That were just a lot of terms thrown around, and well, what does that mean? And we're using similar terms in different ways, and people are just trying to get their head around it. I think I'm sure there's some marketing term or whatever in terms of like adoption of ideas or concepts, and I think sustainability. Exactly. There you go. Make a curve with anything. Exactly. So, I think with sustainability, we've passed that hump of critical mass. Let's just say. I just think
that's good.
I think it's in there. I think it's in design. Processes across the board now.
Yeah. Very cool. So, bringing it back to AU, what's your main takeaway here? Halfway through the official day 2.
Apart from it's tiring, so tiring.
It's part of the game,
It is.
I said when we got here, we had finished the first marathon.
Yeah.
And now we're at the starting line to do the next marathon.
How's your steps? Have you got a step?
My steps are going crazy.
Yeah, it's tiring. The main takeaways, I think it's really great to see what Autodesk have been doing with. We've been doing with the Forma team for the last 2 years and stuff, and they're really great to collaborate with and stuff. And we've had a good insight into what the direction they're going with their building design and the more detailed pieces in Forma, and we have good kind of roadmaps in terms of integrating with that. We see that as a really great thing. That Revit has been brilliant for us for like a long time, but there is challenges in Revit, and more to do with how people use Revit. It is a heavy documentation tool, so Forma being like this kind of really iterative design tool is really great for what we do as well. So that's been a really great thing to see what they're doing, and I'm excited for the next year working with them on what's coming up. Apart from that, I think I've got, certainly I mentioned earlier, I'm not by any means an expert in AI, nor would I claim to be, but it's really great to see some practical solutions using AI. For a number of years, as I said, I've always sort of raised an eyebrow when people said we'll use AI, and I've never really seen this is a brilliant use of it. And some of the stuff that those guys are doing in terms of the Autodesk Assistant is brilliant.
And a massive change even since last year when they were talking about
exactly.
It was more conceptualized this year.
It's real. So that's been good. I mean, it's just always brilliant. Tiring as it may be, AU, it's always brilliant just to come and see people and like be part of the general buzz around things and talk to like-minded people about things like this. The last few years with the rise of Zoom and Teams and stuff, like we do an awful lot of online calls, don't we? Sure. And like just bumping into people that I've met like on Teams loads of times, and they're like, "Oh, you're taller than I thought," or not as tall, or whatever. It's kind of great. It's brilliant. So meeting people is always great.
The energy of these live events is always super fun.
A lot of energy in Nashville. I think Nashville has quite a good energy as well. I think it's been a good spot for it,
For sure. So a couple rapid fire questions for you as we wrap up. So first, the tagline for Great Tech is modeling the future.
Yeah.
What does that mean and look like to you?
That's a good one. What does that mean? I think that means being forward thinking, not just. Sorry, I know you said quick fire, but I'm.
It can be thoughtful fire.
Yeah, thoughtful fire. Let's just call it that. I think it needs to be innovation. You know, architects and engineers, while they are super positive and enthusiastic about adopting new technology, if you leave them to it, sometimes they're super busy, so they'll stick to what they know. Do you know what I mean? In some ways, you need to bring the industry along. Us as software solution developers, you guys, you know, in a similar place. You guys are very forward thinking, really good innovation, and I think innovation is the key to modeling the future. You know.
So you set up the next rapid fire question perfectly.
Okay.
What does innovation mean?
What does innovation mean? I mean, like, not to fall back on a tried and tested thing, but it's like that idea of, was it Henry Ford? If you asked what do they want, they would have said a faster horse, or you know what I mean? It's like it's taking what people think they want and applying what
they
really
want.
They want, exactly what they really want. Exactly. You know, sometimes people don't have the time, or they haven't got into thinking about what they really want. It's just surface level. They have a problem they need answered, and that's what they'll tell you. And you need to untangle that and figure out, well, how can we do this in a really meaningful, innovative way? I think that's innovation for me, anyway.
It's interesting when you bring up Henry Ford's quote on that with developing the Model T, is they didn't even have the language to describe what a car was.
That's why it resonates really well now, doesn't it? It's a great, saying or whatever.
For sure.
That's
a good one.
That captures it for me, you know.
Yeah. Well, how do people find out more information on FenestraPro and connect with you?
Yeah, FenestraPro.com. You find it with an F, FenestraPro. Yeah, like you find me on LinkedIn as well. I'm sure you'll put it out there on your socials. Happy to chat to anyone as always. And listen, it's been brilliant talking.
Awesome. Well, I got one more question for you. So if I could give you all construction power, you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing, what would you pick to innovate?
I think I would make, and this might be a controversial one, but I would have everyone on a similar design platform. You know,
platform.
I'm not going to answer that, but like I'm not saying any particular platform, but like everyone speaking the same language in simple terms. Of course, there will be things feeding in and out of that for different areas or specialisms or whatever, but like one core anchor. That's a better way of describing it. I think there's a lot of fragmentation in our industry in terms of different design platforms and stuff like that, and that can be great. And again, going back to people are people, and they need to work with what they know and what they're good at and what they know they can get results out of. But it can make it maybe difficult for an innovative workflow to come to the fore when you're trying to link all these things up. I don't know, that's just me, and I'm sure that's another whole debate, I'm sure. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. Well, Simon, thanks so much for taking the time and joining us again.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your AU.
And now it's time for my Todd takes from this episode. First take, shift the envelope decisions left. Early stage choices on glazing, shading, and orientation drive most of a building's comfort, energy, and cost outcomes. With fast feedback loops and tools like Forma and envelope extensions, teams can iterate on facades before documentation locks them in, letting designers be both creative and analytical where it matters most. Second take, AI should remove drudgery, not replace design. The win isn't AI as auditor, it's automating the tedious stuff, option suites, target finding, and heavy documentation, so architects and engineers can focus on judgment and intent. Treat AI like a power tool, useful, fast, and verifiable. And finally, sustainability works best when it hits the wallet and the workflow. Sustainability is past the hype and into everyday practice, especially when early envelope moves cut operational cost. The next unlock is stronger interoperability, ideally a common backbone, so insights flow cleanly from concept to detail without getting lost in translation. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you are interested in learning more, you can visit our sponsor, Great Tech Group, at ASTI.com for more information. You can listen to this podcast anytime by simply going to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, be sure to check out our website, bridgingthegappod.com. As always, I'm Todd Weyandt, thanking you for joining the conversation to model the future on the Bridging the Gap podcast. Keep innovating.